Good morning, everyone. It is July 1st, and I cannot believe it's already, halfway through the year. I still feel like we're celebrating Christmas, and it just amazes me how fast things pass by. But I apologize about the delay. We did have some technical difficulty this morning, but it happens, and the show still goes on because why? We have a lot of value to bring you guys on. I'm having a repeat guest from 2, 3 weeks ago, Miss Sherelle Moore, who is an HR specialist. She's not an HR specialist. You are like the HR person. I don't even know what title to put on to use properly. But you have all these abbreviations, and no one better than yourself to explain wage and hours. So those who are new, I'll let Ms. Sherelle introduce herself quickly, and then we are going to talk about the topic on wage and hour claims.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much, Rosia, for having me back on. I really appreciate this platform to talk about these things. As you know, it's so important, especially wage and hour, because I work with so many clients, and we're always either trying to help them mitigate the risk or get them out of something in court with them and all of that. So I am Sherelle Moore, all those wonderful acronyms that she said after my name. I'm a certified HR consultant, also close to becoming an attorney here soon one day.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. I am the COO for Insight HR Consulting, all things HR, that's us. So looking forward to today talking about wage and hour and all the compliance, the claims, the risks, and all the defense that we need to, as business owners, HR professionals out here.
Yes, and then if I may, because I know there's going to be questions from the audience as well. You have plans to become an attorney. You can become a defense attorney, or what type of attorney?
An employment law attorney.
Okay.
And I won't necessarily be, I don't necessarily plan to be in the courtroom, but just more so to help companies and business owners navigate through these compliance issues. Yeah, I don't want to be in court. No. I mean, I like a little cute outfit to wear in court, but no, I'd rather prefer to work with the clients.
Well, that's good because I'm sure there's a couple of people that would love to hire you and will more than likely need your services. But congratulations, and let's go ahead and get started with wage and hour claims. So, oh man, California has very strict rules, and today only applies to the state of California. You guys know, and have you guys ever been served with a wage and hour, or have heard or have been in a PAGA claim, class action? All of this usually relates to meal breaks, lunch breaks, recording, and time cards. So actually, I want to start off this question because I had a concrete contractor that she's not able to make the call, but she did ask me to ask you on this. So they're still using paper to record, for their time cards. And she's been spooked out because, she kind of does what everybody else does. The companies, they use the same check-in time, which everybody's from, 6 a.m. and they leave at 3 p.m. And she's seen it on my social media, and she's also knows, from friends that have been sued on that. Why is it? Well, I guess the reason they don't have an electronic form yet, it's because, not many people are tech savvy, and they have issues, and the men get frustrated. They're like, oh, I couldn't clock in, so they're still trying to work out to see how they could move over to electronic. But what advice do you give to contractors and staffing agencies that may still be using paper time cards?
Yeah, that's a big thing, because just especially with the lawsuits and things like that. If you still have to use paper, I mean, it's fine. I would make sure, because like you said, sometimes they will just designate like this person worked 9 to 6. No, you don't. You want to make sure the employee is actually filling in the time card. And if there's changes, that the initial, I came in at 9, well, actually, I came in at 9:17. Right. And then they're initialing that, because what I've seen, especially in court cases, is that, we're setting up right? We're setting like, oh no, they worked 40 hours this week or whatever that, wherever that is, but it's actually not the right, it's not the right time, right? Because then the employee comes back and says, no, actually on Tuesday, I worked overtime, right? I worked till 7 o'clock, right? And my manager only had me put down that I worked to 5 or 6. So it's essential that if they are going to be using paper, that paper is signed by the employee, and they need to sign it every day. I know some are like, oh, well, they sign it at the end of the week, and then they certify that they don't have any injuries, that these are all the hours worked. But I'm like, if they're working every day, they're taking breaks, they need an issue in there when they took their break, because that's also essential, right? As part of the documentation trail, right? You're going to hear us say a lot about documentation, making sure I clocked in at 9. I took my break at 11 or 12 or whatever that is, and I took my lunch, obviously before the end of the 5th hour. So it's essential that it's documented correctly and it's acknowledged by that employee.
And attorneys, when they're collecting, this type of documentation, what have you seen, as being an HR, being the HR person and guiding them? What have you seen that employers miss out, or what documentation are they lacking when they're submitting the paperwork over to the attorney? Do you see anything that you're?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because of course, if it's just a generic form, right, an employee just signed it, we all know that's most likely not correct. Sometimes I've heard a judge say that's kind of fraudulent, because nobody works exactly 9 to 6 every day where it's all perfect, right? So there should be some sort of changes reflected on there, right? If they're doing it by, if they're handwriting it in, right? It should reflect that. And it's important that, obviously, I want to make sure I plug that you want to keep these records, right? Between 4, I actually say to keep them 9 years. I know it goes back. Cal Chamber gives 7 years or what have you. But if you're going to be keeping it definitely as a paper trail, you want to make sure that the employee has signed it and you as the supervisor has signed it as well to confirm those hours. So what I've seen is that people will just give a generic form, and then that a lot of times that won't suffice.
And then is there anything that needs to be on the time cards besides, like, any verbiage they should be looking for? Because I know what you're talking about. I've seen, just simple time cards where it just has, the little box and people check in and they sign and that's it.
Yes. I always recommend that they have on there that the acknowledgement from the employee that these hours that I am listing here are the factual hours that I've worked. I did receive my meal period. I did receive my applicable breaks. So that is acknowledged. That should be number one. I do, also like to add on there, I see some employers that add, as we talk about like workers' comp and things like that, where they say that they, I haven't sustained any injuries or anything like that. And it's almost like when you're giving them their final pay and you're saying, these are your final wages. This is saying these are the hours that you worked on these specific days. That's what's important to have on that if you're going to be doing it manual. Okay.
And then the second question that I had too is, what do you do if you paid or are paying someone in cash?
Well, I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that, because what's the documentation trail? Like, you gave me $100. I might say our agreed upon agreement was you were going to pay me $200 an hour, right? And now I go to court and say, my employer I worked for this employer 3 months or what have you, and I have nothing to show for it, right? And that gets employers in trouble, because you need a documentation trail to have something. Now, I have seen where people will give cash for, and even I don't agree with this. They give cash for like little bonuses and things like that. I don't even agree with that, because I tell you, I had a case years ago where this employer was giving, he would give like $25, he called them luck bucks, right? And I came to be his consultant, and he was like, people get luck bucks. And I was like, what's luck bucks? And he's like, well, if they have no injuries this week, I give them $25. If they showed up on time to work, I give them $50 for a week. And I was like, yeah, these luck bucks is going to run out because you're going to miss out on you're going to mess your luck up because one, you shouldn't be paying people to practice in because then they're going to, they may lie and say that there was no injuries because they want, hey, I want $25. Listen, I want to go over to Chili's or, I need a new pair of shoes. So I don't recommend paying in cash at all.
Yeah, I made a video about that about a month ago or so. Especially, and I understand because there's this conception and construction as well. Obviously, if some employers do pay them, do pay direct deposit, but if they are working the weekends or if they have a good relationship with an employee and they're like, oh, well, he'd rather get paid cash because he needs it. I understand. I know, you're coming from a good point, but how are you going to show proof that you are paying them? Like they got paid. They're like, oh, well, I sell them. And I'm like, yeah, but how are you keeping track that they got their lunch breaks missed like that? I'm like, do you see where I'm going with this? Because you do have, a Monday to Friday paycheck and it shows, but on the weekend, they did do something for you. They did work for you. And God forbid if this person gets injured on the weekend as well, you're on the hook. I'm like, aside from you not paying taxes, which is a whole different topic, but
right.
but you're opening up the window and it's just a bad habit that needs to stop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I actually had a similar situation just last week where he gave the guy some money and he said, because he was paying him his regular pay, right? Whether it was like $20 an hour, but he was also giving him an additional $5 an hour to do something else because he's like a mechanic and they're doing something different. And I was like, well, what's the $5? Even the $5 additional an hour is less than the minimum wage. So you're still in violation there. So I said, and he's like, well, what? So overall, I've given this guy like $300. I said, well, then you better just see that as you were giving him a little bonus out of your own pocket, because that if we can't count it towards the overall, the payroll, like you said, taxes, all of those things. And also another important thing to note is I had an employer that said he was paying somebody cash because he didn't have his Social Security card. And I said, well, by law, as an employer, because that's one of the big things too, you want to verify that this employee is authorized to work in the United States. So if you're paying him under the table, I mean, what if you picked him up at Home Depot, listen, that's your business. I don't know. But if you're saying he's your employer and your employee, you need to be paying him the legit way. You need to make sure he's authorized to work here and not be paying $5 an hour, which is below the minimum wage anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to take into consideration.
Yeah, and now that you open up, and I think we should talk a little bit about this because I get these questions a lot, especially now with policy changes, where we're at politically. I mean, this is a state issue because obviously our state is a sanctuary state, and
right.
No matter what, you hire someone to do something for you. You're paying them. They're considered an employee unless they're a subcontractor and they're licensed, but they are still your employee doing and working on your behalf. So they are your liability. So
that's right.
In instances like this, where someone may not, doesn't have a SSN number, if they do, it's a fake one. And how does an employer I guess what's the word or the phrase I'm trying to go for is, what is the correct way to verify people?
To validate
besides using the link. Right.
Yeah, because a lot of them e-verify. A lot of employers do use the e-verify, which it makes it easier for everybody, right? Because when that employee brings their certification, their certifying documents, you're just able to review it, put the information in. If it clears, you're good to go. But a lot don't have that, right? A lot of small businesses don't have that. So when you come in, this is my recommendation, being like you said, in today's, we got ICE, we got all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We are not the obviously the INS police, right? So all we can do is ensure that the document that they provide looks legit, right? So if we're going to go with saying the traditional, or the typical, I shouldn't say traditional, the typical one of reviewing your driver's license or ID card and your social security card, right? And what a lot of employers don't know, which I'm learning as I'm meeting different clients and employers, is that when sometimes they'll see on the social security card valid to work in the United States or something like that. First of all, there's nothing written on the social security card. If there's something written on the social security card, even if it says they're authorized, it's invalid. It's a fraudulent social security card, because Social Security Administration does not print anything on there except for your name and your social security number, and that's it. So if you're validating that and they bring that to you, that's not a validation. And I know this sounds funny and it sounds like it's common sense, but sometimes some of us don't got common sense. Where I've actually seen IDs where there's two people in the ID. You're here with your girlfriend's picture. I mean, hello, that is not a valid ID or a driver's license, right? It should be the California, or because we're speaking California, driver's license, or sometimes they may be from another state, but it should just be their information, and the Social Security should not have anything written on there. Now, even sometimes where I'll see INS cards, sometimes I'll see that as well, and that's obviously not valid. But what I tell employers is you got to do either one or the other. So when I'm hiring people and I'm validating their authorization, sometimes some employers will keep a copy of the driver's license, social security card, or whatever they're using, right? Some don't. You're not required by law to keep a copy of it, but you are required by law to review it. But again, like I said, you're not the INS police. You're just validating, okay, Jose Gonzalez, his social security number is this, right? His driver's license says the same thing, and that's it, and it looks fine. And I write it down. They sign their part. I do my part. Sometimes we don't keep them. It just depends on the employer. Some like to keep it. I want to just also stress, since we're talking about it, is those documents need to be in a separate file from the personnel file. They're never in the personnel file, right? Because at any time,
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that again? All right. So, yes. And this is different because I thought, I've worked for different companies, and when they ask me for my identification, I put everything in one package. I give them my passport, my SSN number, I sign all the employee handbook, and I've received everything in one file. So what is it that employers should have this under?
Yes. So I always tell them to keep an I-9 binder, even like with us, with Inside HR, when we do our HR assessments, one of the first things I do is do an I-9 audit, right? So let's make sure you got all that together. That's part of the compliance piece, right? And I will bring them, actually, I have one right here. I will bring them a I-9 binder. Let me just grab it.
Okay.
I have it here. I have it right here. So I have my handy I-9 binder that I provide. And I always provide a cheat sheet, right? So they know how to fill it out, because if for any reason there was an audit from INS or whatever, when they review this, I have had employers who received fines. I actually had an employer who received a $50,000 fine because all of his I-9s were incorrect, because he didn't fill it out, because it must be filled out within the first 3 days of the employee's hire date. And you must have those defining documents, and it needs to be in a separate folder. Now, you can keep all of the I-9s in that folder. You don't have to have an individual folder for each employee. It just cannot be in their personnel file, because in their personnel file, at any time, that employee or an attorney or the judge, whoever, can request a copy of the personnel file. And you don't want anything to have to do with their citizenship, that's their personal business. Just like not having medical information in the personnel file is the same as well. Or if you're doing an investigation, you want to have, like, let's say there was a sexual harassment investigation. You want to have that in a separate file also, because it's referencing that person, maybe somebody else. So you want that to be confidential, right? So that should be separate from the personnel file.
Wow, I didn't know the I-9. I thought that was part of like the onboarding, right? They collect identification and like you said, working from past employers, that's what I would do. And, provide it, sign all the paperwork, do the onboarding. Wow.
Yep. It's always some little fun and nuances out there. So that's why it's good to have an HR professional come and kind of do a once over as an HR assessment. Even I've had, we work with a lot of companies where they have HR managers on site, but no HR managers overwhelmed. Y'all need a mental health day. I know what it looks like. So we come in and maybe there's some things that they overlooked or they didn't get a chance to get to it. So that's one of the main things that I do to make sure that compliant piece is out of there. So you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. And you touch a great point, Cheryl, because it's the lack of training, because if I think back, I was offered an HR job when I was first applying for colleges, HR assistant. And then when I was working in workers' comp claims and I was 25, someone offered an HR position for me. But, at 25, I didn't know any of that stuff. Yeah, I could deal with workers' comp claims. I could look at your benefits plan. I could, make sure that I'm the person that could translate and talk for employees and so forth. But would I know? And then am I trained on all of this stuff that you don't know?
Yes. I always find it, I'm always amused because I'll go and meet with a client or what have you. And they'll say, oh, Justine is my HR person. So I go and sit down with Justine and I'm like, okay, Justine, let's talk about, your compliance, like, where you are, what do we need to look over? As I said, we do an HR assessment, and Justine has been disapproving time cards. She's like, I don't know what the law is. What's this? Like, what should you in this? Oh, I don't know that. So it may not be the HR. The HR title sometimes gets thrown around in a way it should not, because we literally get updates by the minute, the hour. I mean, gosh, especially when COVID was going on, good night. It was like every 5 seconds, all the laws that change. But the laws can change by the day. I mean, I did a handbook a couple of weeks ago. Before I could get it to the print for the owner, there was 2 new ordinance that I had to change because of their business. Mm-hmm. So, you want somebody that knows what's going on with compliance, and because, these claims can really take down business.
Especially in our state where things are constantly changing. And I'll ask this question go on this, and we'll talk briefly, because I know there's some changes with minimum wage starting today, I believe, if I'm not incorrect.
Starting today, absolutely. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, so hold on. We have a question for Maria Rivera -F7D. What if they provide a green card?
Yes, that's perfect. Same thing. Even if they provide a green card in any of those defining requirements that's on the back of the new I-9s, because we got new I-9s as of this year. They can definitely put it, but you just want to make sure it's not expired. Right. And so again, just looking over it, if it looks legit, we accept it. Now, if it looks like doesn't look compliant, you definitely want to give that candidate, obviously they're not an employee yet now because we haven't certified them yet. But you want to give them, you can give them a letter basically stating, what, per the law, we are required to have this, and this. I would give them a copy of the I-9, and then there's forms. I have like letters that I keep for those type of things, because I will tell you, I have, just in the last, I'd say 5 years alone, I've had where different scenarios as it relates to people with their INS cards and all of that is, I had a guy that came into an employer and said, somebody's been using my Social Security card for the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. And he hadn't done his taxes. And when he went to go do his taxes, there was some other income in El Monte that somebody was good, and he tracked it down, to that employer. So, or somebody, I've had employees that have told me, I've been using my cousin's Social Security card. She works over at the bank, and 3 of my cousins actually are using her Social Security number to get paid. I was like, well, how was your name on the card? So then there are letters that we have to give them. We have to give them an opportunity to come back. Now, if they come back and they tell you, like I've had where they come back and they've said, yeah, I was using a fraudulent Social Security number. Here is my new Social Security number. And there's a letter you give them, but then you have to make the switch. And then you report it to the Social Security Administration. And then
Wow.
they'll say, oh yeah, there's a lot of little steps out there.
We are, let me ask this question from David Joseph.
Okay.
I've always advised clients, employers to not make photocopies of documents used in connections with I-9s since they are not required by law. Do you agree?
I 100% agree. That's what I was saying earlier. Either you do it or you don't do it. So if you don't do it for anyone. Verify it and give it back to them, and let's keep it pushing, right? Because I don't want to have anything around, because again, I'm not the police. I only saw what the person gave me. That's why as part of our service, we give you a cheat sheet. We even give you samples of a copy, because we did this training from when our current president, when he was president before, because there was a huge, obviously a lot of things with immigration and all of that, where they did this huge training on, and that's when we found out you don't necessarily have to keep copies. All these years, and I've been in HR for 30 years now, we always kept it, right? Whenever, I think it started with 26 years ago or something. We always kept a copy. But when they said we didn't have to, I was like, oh, let's clean that out and throw that stuff and shred that stuff, because I don't want to have anything that could, lead to us being audited and find something, because nothing is file proof. You may have saw something, you may have collected something that was expired or whatever. So get rid of it.
That is just, it's crazy, and I didn't know about the photocopies, because like I said, I work with employers and they took copies of my thing. They're like, oh, we just, I was younger too, and I still, I'm 32 years old today, and I don't know about that because I thought it was part of the onboarding process, where you bring in a verification and they take copies of your ID and all of that stuff, and you keep it for record in case anything, comes up.
Right. And it is, but but you don't have to, it's part, you're, like you said, it is part of the onboarding process, because you do want to verify, but not necessarily have to keep it. Absolutely.
Okay. Maria has a question. What will trigger an audit?
Oh, Maria, girl, everything will trigger an audit, right? People getting underpaid, and we'll talk about that. Well, people getting not in the right exemption, people saying that their meal and rest, like you mentioned, meal and rest break periods, classifications being wrong, people not the timekeeping. That's a huge one, where people are working off the clock, and then they say, they report it to now what we call the Civil Rights Department, and we think, oh, okay, well, she worked off the clock, let's just pay her a little 4 hours or whatever. But now you're in the database now, so now that can lead to, folks wanting to audit. What do they got to do? They got time on their hands. They want to come out and audit your stuff.
Yeah. And let's talk about, since you open up the conversation for non-exempt and exempt employees, I did see we had a comment from Roberto, and I think he's on, but if he is on, comment and say hi. But he did have a question, and he left it under a comment section saying, can you go over and explain the difference between non-exempt and exempt employees?
Okay. So a non-exempt employee is your hourly employee, right? This is where we're documenting their time based on the hours. And let me say this, and let me say it clear. It's always best for everybody to be in the best scenario would be everybody would be non-exempt, right? Because you're making sure that they're getting paid for the actual hours worked, right? So I mean, obviously that those are people that clock in, they have to document their time. They're paid for their breaks, but they don't have to be paid for their lunch. There's some that do get paid for lunch, but they don't have to. But at the minimum, you have to give them 30 minutes, right? But that's for any hours worked. Obviously, not exempt is an exempt person. And typically an exempt person is a person that has a little bit of authority. You're thinking, or they have a specialized skills, like maybe, obviously HR consultants.
I know sales. I know a lot of sales teams are exempt.
Yes. Because, even, I mean, we even we hire an HR generalist and have them as an hourly HR generalist, right? Because the type of duties that they're doing is based kind of on the duties. Like, I would say like tactical duties, administrative, those type of things. Now, more so of a strategic person, and I'm using HR as the guide, as an HR business partner, because, I'm working with you, I'm strategizing with you on your business. I'm providing consultative services on what to do when it comes to performance management, corrective action, or all of those type of things. So then, and I would, as an exempt employee, you don't have to clock your hours, but here's the thing: you work, because me as an exempt person, I work all the time, holidays, vacations, right? It don't matter. Like I was on a cruise or working on a handbook. So, and my time is, I get paid whatever my salary is, and make sure that the salary has to be twice the minimum wage, just so you know, for anybody that's exempt, not hourly, right? So if non-exempt is 17 something an hour, then salary must be double that time for pay, just so you know. So if I work 2 hours in a day, I get paid for the whole day, because there are times, correct, as an exempt salaried employee, because there are times where as an exempt salary employee, I work on a Saturday and a Sunday, and I don't get paid for those Saturdays and Sundays. Listen, and I hear my husband's mouth all the time. So like, oh, we're at Denny's, and you got your laptop right here, really? But so that's why you have that. But as an hourly employee, if they're working, you got to make sure that they're getting paid for every hour worked. And let me just tell you, because I hear it all the time. I mean, I have employers that will wrestle me to the ground about, well, such and such, he worked on Saturday, but all he did was answer 2 customer calls, and they were less than 2 minutes. You got to pay him for that time, unfortunately, right? If I take the call, hey, I took the call, but as an hourly employee, you must pay me for that time. Anything over 8 hours in a day, anything over 40 hours in a week is considered overtime, no matter what, right? So if they work over, you have to pay them.
And I have a question about that, because now we're talking about hourly. I know a lot of employers, to be safe, they round up. So if someone, let's say it's a restaurant and they are running a little bit behind, they work 30 minutes. Do they get paid the 30 minutes that they worked, or is it the full hour?
So you just only have to pay for the time worked.
Okay.
So like you said, so if I make sure I understand it correctly. So I'm supposed to be off at 4, but I worked to 4:30.
Yeah, you worked an extra 30 minutes because, they're understaffed and someone came in and, it usually happens a lot in restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
And because I have 2 restaurants, so I'm asking, because I know they do this to play it safe, and because, they're nice, they'll round up and just give them the full hour to be, to play it safe. But,
that's nice.
That's
nice, but not required. That's nice, but not required. So if it's only 30 minutes that they work, you only have to pay 30 minutes. And I do know we have a lot of restaurants as well, and they'll do that just as a nice gesture. Now, in talking about that, it's also, so, you have reporting time. So, or time worked. So let's say, like to this example of working at a restaurant. And so, you were late, you were coming in late or whatever, or what I don't know what the scenario could be, but if you're scheduled to work and you come and the employer says, oh no, well, Timmy's going to just work your shift, whatever, you must at least give that, because that employee showed up to work, you must at least give that employee report, time. So at least 2 hours, at the minimum 2 hours.
Yeah, it also happens in construction as well.
I'm sorry?
It also happens in construction as well. So, yes. If they're saying, hey, you know what, we don't need this many men, and they say, okay, you could go even though they started a day. I know there is a requirement, because I always hear the unions talking about it, like, hey, if the guy drives or whatever, you have to pay them. And then I believe that's what they said. You have to pay them the minimum 2 hour.
Absolutely. And that's absolutely correct. And that's for any industry. And if somebody shows up and you send them home. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's hourly.
Okay. Now I want to go back to exempt. And exempt is the salary people, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when it comes to salaries, and I'm saying it because I know a couple of people right now that I'm thinking on top of my head that, if the minimum wage is, $20 an hour, whatever, and they're salaried, they are paying what you would earn in a year and not the double time, like what you mentioned.
Correct. So you just would double whatever the minimum wage is for that city. Correct. So to your point, if it's $20 an hour, then they must make 40 an hour, 40 an hour, but whatever that salary, and I'm not good at math, so don't get me the line up here, but whatever it is, double that amount, that's their salary for the year. Correct.
Wow. Okay. And what if they're not doing that right now?
They want to make sure they get that change. So okay. So then why would they not be doing it?
Because they are, maybe they're not correctly, they don't know it. Or, they've been doing this where they just pay them bare minimum salary, which is, I believe it's like 67,000 or something.
Okay. Yeah. It's like 68 something right now.
Yeah.
And it changes. I mean, it depends on where you are now. And I want to point out before I go there, I want to say, yes, the minimum wage has changed as of today, but it's Los Angeles.
Yes.
So I want to just make sure. I don't know where everyone's at, but it's certain areas, it's certain cities and incorporated cities, right? It's not like the Inland Empire didn't change. It's like a Los Angeles in certain areas now. But to go back to that point, if there is a classification test that you can do, like I said, it's always best to pay them hourly, right? So then that's the correct amount. So that's always best, right? But if it's actually better in their favor if they're paying hourly than the opposite. So if they're paying them, if they got somebody exempt and they're paying below the minimum of what that exemption salary should be, you want to immediately do a test to ensure, that they were actually supposed to be classified as exempt, because they may not have been. But if it's a true exemption, you immediately want to make the correction and pay what the difference was. So if they've been doing it for the last 3 months, and I get this all the time, I mean, I get this more so than I get anything else, where, yeah, they were in an exempt role and they were just getting underpaid.
And we have a question. We have a long question. I see it. Let's bring it. All right. Pistola Moreno. Hi, Pistola. What about people that want to do an internship and the employer offers a non-paid mentorship at their company while they perform daily company activities that the regular employees would be performing? Are they required to get paid?
Yes. Now, because you got to really look at, now these internships can get you in trouble as well, because like, let's say if it's an internship, like you have some college student, like I actually have a client out in Eagle Rock. They're a huge construction company and they actually do have interns, right? Mm-hmm. They have, because they're doing creating sky risers or whatever, right? And so they have they have partnered with the local colleges out there, and part of that is they'll have interns come in, and there's certain hours per week that they come, and they're learning about instructional design, or or something like that, right? So that right there is a true like internship. Now, if you're having somebody work and they're doing the exact same hours as somebody else, then in that scenario, it should be a paid internship.
Oh yeah, that one's a good complex one. And I know, okay, so if you are, I know him personally. He is in construction, trucking. So I would definitely look into that. Maybe you could share what they're doing as well, because I know in construction, and so does my industry as well, we do hire interns. We have like, the college ones, it's volunteer where you come in. But now, because lawsuits and so forth, I know they are offering paid, and I know some construction companies do offer free internships for like 6 weeks, but they're usually like in the office. So they're there, watching versus being hands on.
Yes. So those can be true internships. And I'll tell you, I actually just did the contract for them. You definitely want to make sure you have a letter that states that, right? Because you outline, these are the duties you're going to be doing. You're not going to be blah, blah, blah. Because also with workers' comp, right? When you try to make sure you cover that person in case they're injured. So we want to make sure everything's outlined clear in the contract.
Oh yeah, because workers' comp it excludes volunteers.
Yes.
It's their general liability. All right, so Maria Rivera has another one. If an exempt employee quits, do I owe them a paycheck?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Okay, listen, don't have me working for you, Maria, and then I don't get my check at the end of this, at the end of my assignment. Yes, you definitely want to pay them, and it's all still the same. So, and I'm glad you brought that up, because let's say you decide to end that relationship. You want to make sure that they get paid that same day that you're ending that relationship, right? So if you're saying, Maria, Friday is your last day, you better have Maria's check ready on Friday. Now, you come in today and you're like, listen, I'm done with this. I'm over it. Actually, I had one this morning at 7:00. He sent me his resignation letter, and that he was done. He didn't want to work at the company any longer. And so what I advised him was, thank you for letting me know that you no longer want to work for the company. We have 72 hours to get you your final pay. So if we decide, and we've decided on a date, even if the employee has decided, July 2nd is my last day, he's told you, so you got time, right? July 6th, you got time to get him his check. Now, if they just come in short notice, you got 72 hours. But if you know the date, you want to make sure they have their check on that date. It doesn't matter if they're exempt or non-exempt.
Wow. I'm going to use my personal story here, because I actually I was exempt. And this is, I'm not going to go back and sue the employer, any of that stuff. But when I was, what was it? Maybe like 6 years ago, I did quit my workers' comp claims, and I did it, the day of, and immediately. And I didn't get paid, but I thought, I didn't know you're supposed to not get paid.
Well, I wish I would have been your friend then. We'll see, because I was like, girl, here's the letter. Go get your check.
Yeah, I did not know that. Like, this company already sold out. They're done, and all of that. And I did not know that.
You're supposed to get your all hours. So let's make sure I'm clear on that. So not just, I'm just like, I worked, 5 hours or whatever. If the company offers, if they offer vacation hours, anything accrued is considered wages. So if the company's like, you worked here a year, you get 40 hours, or that's a typical situation. And you've accrued those 40 hours, your final check is supposed to include those 40 hours. Now, That doesn't include sick time. I know a lot of employers get that confused where they think they have to pay out sick. You don't have to pay out any sick time or anything like that. But vacation time is considered wages. You don't have to give vacation, but if you do decide to give it, it's considered wages. And in terms of payout, it has to be paid out at the time of termination.
Wow.
Yes.
All right, let's see. You still had said thank you. Yeah. So if you're not following Sherelle, follow Sherelle. He's, you guys are both on LinkedIn, and you could, ask her directly for any questions that you may have on your company or dad's company. Yeah. So back to exempt employees. That's a great, I know a lot of people get it confused, and when it comes to sales teams, I'm going to touch on this because I have a couple of residential contractors that they do landscaping, they do plumbing, and they have salespeople that go out door knocking or calling and trying to make a sale for their service, and they have them exempt. Some of them pay hourly plus commission. And then I know some companies do commission only, which I am not sure how that goes or what, if it's right or wrong or what is it. But for those companies that are doing commission only and they are an employee, is that legal, or is there like a way to like?
Yeah, it just depends on it's legal, but there's lots of guidelines under that. There, you want to make sure that because and usually those are, like you said, typical sales type positions. Usually there should be some sort of base, and it can be minimum wage. It doesn't have to be, some big huge salary. But I always like to look at what the contract is stating is towards in as it relates to commission, because there's like a little fine line on how that should be set up. And I think most they do give like maybe a minimum wage or like stipend, like where you get let's say 500 a week or whatever. I'm just throwing numbers out there, but then and that's just for general situation, because you're using your phone to to pay to contact customers on our behalf, so there are certain guidelines under that. So I would like to, get you some more information, and whoever that is, please hit me up on LinkedIn, because I can get you some more information on how that breaks down.
I'll get you connected with my client. I'm making a note right now.
Okay, yeah,
because he is a plumber. He's doing really good, but things like this happen, like and it's he's a young guy, and when we're growing our company and it's going quick and everything's handy dandy, it's really easy to slip, and it complies with all it takes. I always tell people all it takes is one situation, one bad apple, and it doesn't even have to be a bad thing. It's just that you didn't know it was done incorrectly until you got the lawsuit, and unfortunately, like that's exactly what the attorneys are going to look for. They're going to say, "Oh wait, hold on, buddy, what do you mean you haven't been tracking your sales guys' meals and this, you have him exempt, you're paying him as a 1099, but he's acting like an employee, so which one is it?" And that's that's a huge thing in sales and construction. They 1099 their people, but they act like employees. And I always say there's a fine definition, and I'll let you answer. I see another question here. I want to bring it up.
Exactly. I do want to throw in there just to kind of summarize the exempt versus the non-exempt. I just want to say just highlight the common mistakes about that is giving somebody a salary and a fancy title, assuming then that makes them exempt. It does not, because the law requires that exemption depends on the actual job duties. That's why I said we typically do an exemption test, not the job title. And then, because, I'll see where they'll give somebody, oh, they're an executive, they're an administrative, but they must meet both the duties test and the strict salary basis test, as I was saying. And then obviously the salary threshold, making sure, the double, the minimum wage. And then that you do, if you do have employees that are exempt, that you treat them as exempt, right? So, not the duties are the duties, right? So they're not getting paid for overtime. They're not, or anything like that. So I just want to make sure I threw that out there.
David said, "Nice job, ladies. Always helpful to be refreshed in this environment, is ever-changing state. Sherelle, I miss you, but love being semi-retired. Now mainly working for nonprofits, small startups, and friends." David.
Okay, David. Hello there. Miss you too. Now I know who that is. Yes. Okay. Well, then good. You can buy me lunch one of these days. So, just saying. Sit your own vacation.
HR is just never anything. I tell people, like, HR is a complete separate, its own department. There's a lot of compliance. There is a lot of rules, especially in California, New York, any of the states that are classified as blue and they have their own thing. You have to be very careful and make sure that you follow the rules. Every state's different, but here in California, things are changing constantly. There's a lot of things that are changing, and how would I say? There's also a lack of knowledge, maybe, from the state to show and train employees, like, what is it? I mean, employers, like, what is it that they need to know, what they need to do, where to go, because it's so easy for someone to make a mistake. And like I said, it's not that they did it on purpose. It was just an unknowing mistake. And, the attorneys get a hold of it, and you are faced with a wage and hour claim.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you right now, the judges have and I hope if there's so many attorneys on board, speak up, because the judges, they do not care if you don't know. I actually heard one say that 2 weeks ago. He said, the employer said, well, I didn't know, because he was an independent contractor and he had him working and he was doing the same thing that all the other employees was doing. He didn't have a license. He didn't have his own outside insurance. He just was, and then he was paying him lower than what the other people were getting paid or whatever. It was ridiculous. And so the judge said, it's still on you, Mr. Employer, to know. It's on your job to know what these laws are. They're posted. They're on the Fair Housing website, the Department of Labor. That's why you definitely want to have somebody in HR that knows. Even if you don't have an HR person on site, you want to have some sort of HR consultant that can come in and do an audit for you. Because to your point about, like, the independent contractor, this is one of the biggest risk things that I always see, because under the ABC test, right, the worker is, free from the company's control and direction. The worker performs, obviously, work outside, like you said, a plumber. So if I'm a designated plumber, I'm coming to do work for you. I also work for somebody else. I'm not following your company set hours, your locate, all of that type of stuff. I am truly there to fix what I need to fix, and I leave, right? So these things can get us in trouble all the time. And I see as you asked about an audit, like, red flags is, there's no written contract or business license on file. And whenever I get some sort of outside contractor to do work for us or something, I'm required that they have their own liability insurance, right? Because, we're human, we make mistakes. And so you should have some sort of emissions, some sort of something, EPLI or something. And I request that certification, because you're doing work for me or one of my clients. And I want to ensure that you have the proper licenses, you have the proper certification, if it's required. And that's what employers need to be thinking too, when they're thinking, oh, I want to put this person as a independent contractor. No. You want to go over what that ABC test is, right? Those 3 ABC, you want to go over what that is. And they have to meet all 3 of those things, right? They have to be free from the company's control. They have to perform work outside, like I mentioned. And it's customary engaged in being an independent contractor. If I come and do your hair, I'm an independent contractor. I'm here to do this job, and then I leave and I go do it for someone else as well.
Yeah, and a lot of people make that mistake as well because they don't want to pay the taxes, or
Exactly.
the person they're hiring is saying, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to pay the taxes. I'm just gonna run it on my own. I will be, your best performer. I'm your HR person. I'm your whatever it is." Um, and then they get an audit, or unfortunately, because people, if they're working for you and they get hurt, you
Yeah,
are the one responsible. If
absolutely.
they if you miss the payment and they get paid, you are the one responsible, and they're not a 1099. You didn't pay your person who you classified as a 1099, but they were never a 1099. They were an actual employee who you were just not paying taxes on.
Exactly. Exactly. And those are huge fines. Believe
Hmm.
me. Yes. I mean, we've seen businesses shut down due to these type of audits that pop up, and because they can't afford the fees, or they have to lay off people because they can't afford to pay. Yeah.
Yeah. All of this. But Mr. I can't see, we could be talking, just keep going on and talking and
I
talking.
know it. There's so
Um,
much to cover.
we
we
are
we
at the
actually need to
one.
do a part two. Yeah.
I know. Yes, we do. And I'm sure there's gonna be questions on the replay and comments and stuff, because I'm telling you, this is a very touchy topic. So there's people that have situations, and these things are not gonna stop. They're very popular. Lawsuits, you see them across, and unfortunately, like, if it's one person, it's more than likely going on with multiple people. That's where the class action, that's where PAGA kicks in. And that's where an attorney sees a winning case, and in your end, you're going to lose because you are out of compliance.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So, Sherelle, where can people reach you out?
Yes. So please, please, please reach out to me. Here's my email. And I was trying to share my screen, but here's my email. My email is smoore. So SMOORE at insighthrconsulting.com. So smoore at insightconsultinghr.com. And my phone number is 951 531 5557. So again, 951 531 5557.
Thank
I
you.
like to keep
And I'll make sure
easy
to,
number.
listen in the comments both on YouTube and on LinkedIn, so you guys could reach out to her. She is the HR person. So, like, you have questions and stuff, reach out to her. I am just the insurance broker. I only provide insurance, but I will guide you, and I'll let you know, if it's wrong, or, you need to talk to a specialist on this. Because again, as an advisor, I want to make sure that you guys are doing the best for yourselves. As we mentioned, we're not the cops, we're not the regulators. We are going to tell you, hey, this is what you do. It's up to you if you want to make a change and protect your company, or if you want to keep rolling the dice until you get sued.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I thank you. I thank you for this. And as always, reach out, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And you guys, thank you so much for watching, commenting. I wish all of you guys a very happy holiday, long weekend. Stay safe. Don't do anything risky. Of course, don't drink and drive, please. And make sure that you guys are up to date. Follow us. We keep up. We try to always update all of us. And then David here commented before we're getting off, let's make Sandra buy us lunch and cocktails.
Agreed. Agreed.
All right, guys, thank you so much. And then Martha Rogers said, thank you. Thank you for watching, Martha. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
And enjoy
Martha.
your weekend.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.